difference between life and death. Shot down over North Vietnam in the mid-1960s, these American prisoners of war rarely saw each other in the prison camp they called the Hanoi Hilton. Yet, they were able to communicate. For 7 years, the American POWs supported one another by using a series of remarkable secret codes. Even in the face of severe torture from the North Vietnamese, the Americans not only struggled to communicate with each other, but with their nation as well. Jeremiah Denton and Sam Johnson first communicated in code in 1966.
I was shot down in April, and it took 25 days to get me up to Hanoi, which is where Admiral Denton was, and after a week of, they called it interrogation. It was pretty severe torture for military information. They threw me in a cell one night late, and I hear this thump on the wall, and then this voice, "Who are you?" And it was Jerry. And real quick, without even any introduction at all, he said, "I want to teach you a code." And he taught me the tap code.
The tap code was a simple method of communication that substituted letters for numbers. But the need to keep the taps concealed was essential, as the North Vietnamese severely tortured those POWs found attempting to communicate.
And they really had a severe crackdown on communications. And they put a guard up against my door with his chair leaning against the door, his head on the door. He could hear me breathe. And that's when I thought, what we really need is some way to communicate that they can hear and not realize it's communications, because I was so desperately frustrated with guys screaming in torture. If we could just communicate, but I couldn't think of a way. So it's a way of using natural sounds to communicate coherently, and they don't even know you're communicating. If the guy was close enough to you and you wanted to say good night, or you'd say, that's a G. That's an N, good night. You knew that. That was an abbreviation. And then, it's another G. That's a B. You. Good night, GP. God bless you.
American POWs also attempted to use code to communicate back home. Shortly after his capture, Jeremiah Denton was forced to provide a taped television interview. Through torture, the North Vietnamese hoped the Navy captain would renounce his support for United States policy.
The first time I answered it, and this is practically verbatim, I don't know what my government's policy is in Vietnam now, because the only news sources I have are North Vietnamese radio, newspapers and magazines. But whatever the policy of my government is, I support it, and I will support it as long as I live.
Incredibly, Denton used Morse code to communicate to Americans back home. By repeatedly blinking his eyes while speaking, he spelled the word torture.
And at that point, I decided I would try to blink my eyes in Morse code to obviate the possibility that they would, in spite of what I planned to say against their side and for our side, dub words into my mouth. So at least I wanted my people to know I had been tortured, and that others were. So I was able to answer their questions while at the same time blinking torture.
The interview, which was broadcast on American television on May 17, 1966, was the first confirmation that American POWs in Vietnam were being tortured.
Communications was the very essence of our lives. Without it, we would have died, mentally, psychologically.
As we have seen, coded communications are a fascinating aspect of our human ability and need to communicate, one that spans the history of both our nation and our species. Every day, each of us encounters or employs some form of its use. Gender-specific communication, wordplay, and even body language are just a few of the myriad ways we communicate using codes. I hope our excursion into this pervasive and intriguing subject will inspire you to want to learn more. Why not visit a